We are now into part 2 of study session 5. So you are welcome back to our forms of elasticity. We have looked at the price elasticity of demand, the income elasticity of demand. That is could be defined as the measure of the degree of responsiveness or quantity demanded of a commodity to changes in the income of the consumer. Like price, income is a very important determinant of demand. So from that meaning, how do we compute income elasticity of demand? It is given as change in quantity demanded over change in income of the consumer. Then this could be written as change in quantity demanded over initial quantity demanded divided by change in income all over initial income. Then that could be finally be written as change in quantity demanded over change in income multiplied by change in income multiplied by initial income all over initial quantity demanded. So now the value obtained from this relationship could be used in classifying our goods into necessity or luxury, normal good or inferior good. When the value of the income elasticity of demand is less than 1, then the good in question is a necessity. On the other hand, when the value of the income elasticity of demand is greater than 1, then the good in question is a luxury. Then it is possible for our good to be normal or inferior. For a good that is normal, that is commodities for which an increase in income of the consumer will ordinarily result into increase in their demand. So goods that we consume, there are some that are normal. For example, if you have higher income or you earn more income, we expect that maybe if you can afford to buy a car, then you buy a car. Then by buying that car with your increase in income, then that car is a normal good. So any commodity for which an increase in income results into an increase in quantity demanded is referred to as a normal good. And for that good, the value of income elasticity of demand will be positive. That is, positive relationship between income and quantity demanded. However, when for a commodity an increase in income results into a fall in quantity demanded, then that good is referred to as an inferior good, which is the opposite of a normal good. So we can see that the sign that will come from our computation of the income elasticity of demand will be negative. When the value is negative, telling us that is this slope will be negative, then telling us that the relationship between the two is an inverse relationship. So when income increases, quantity demanded has fallen rather than increasing, unlike in the case of a normal good. Then one other concept that we also need to understand clearly is the concept of cross price elasticity of demand. This is peculiar to goods that are substitutes or complements. When we say a good is a substitute, I gave example earlier on. These are goods for which you can, if you are not taking one, there are other ones you can take, and we still give you the satisfaction that is close to what you obtain from the other one that you have not purchased, maybe due to the increase in price. And example of substitute, we have beef and chicken, service rendered by MTN and rendered by other providers. Even for bank services too, you can have substitutes. Then we have complements. That is, these are goods that have joint demand. For example, SIM card and handset, they have joint demand. Car and petrol, they have joint demand. So those ones are complementary goods. Now, the computation of this is also very straightforward. It is given as percentage change in quantity of X, because we are talking about two commodities now. Then all over percentage change in the price of the other one. That is, we are saying that the changes in price of Y will influence the quantity demanded of X. So since they are complements or substitute, for complementary good, when there is an increase in price of one, then there will be fall in the demand of other one. For example, if the prices of handsets go up, when the prices go up or increase, then the demand for SIM card will be affected. It will drop because only few people, because if you are unable to buy the handset, you will not need to buy SIM card because they have growing demand. So that one will be negative. But for substitutes, if for example the price of Milo increases, demand for Bonvita will increase on the both end, then that is a positive relationship. So which implies that after computing this, if you obtain a value of E substitute XY, that is quantity demand cross elasticity of demand, your value is negative. When the value obtained from here is negative, then the goods in question X and Y must be a complement. On the other hand, when the value obtained from this is positive, then the goods in question X and Y will be substitutes. So which means we can use this in classifying our goods into substitutes or complements. So those are the key things we have to understand under the concept of cross price elasticity of demand. Now we have been talking about demand. Then let's look at the concept of elasticity of supply. Now, elasticity of supply is the measure of degree of responsiveness of quantity supplied to changes in price. So it is possible that our price normally will fluctuate. When price fluctuates, how will those fluctuations affect the quantity supplied? And that is measured by the elasticity of supply. This could be given as percentage change in quantity supplied over percentage change in price. That is, price is influencing quantity supplied, and that could be written mathematically as change in quantity supplied over change in initial quantity supplied. Change in quantity supplied all over initial quantity supplied divided by change in price all over initial price equals to change in quantity supplied over initial quantity supplied multiplied by initial price all over change in price. And this will, with rearrangement, this is what we have as the formula for our elasticity of supply. We observe in this case there is no negative sign, because the law of demand, law of supply says that the higher the price, the higher the quantity supplied, because suppliers will be willing to sell more at higher price. However, consumers are willing to buy less at higher price. So here is a positive relationship. For demand, it's a negative relationship. So the slope here is a positive one, whereas in the case of elasticity of demand, it is a negative slope. So what are the degrees of price elasticity of demand? So like this is just a replica of what we have learned under the price elasticity of demand. So we have 5 degrees or forms of price elasticity of demand. The first one is perfectly elastic supply. In this case, the value of elasticity of supply so obtained from this relationship will be equal to infinity. Then, on the other hand, in this case, we have a vertical demand, so a vertical supply curve. Horizontal supply curve, because the value is equal to. So, if you have good understanding of elasticity of demand, then this will guide our understanding. The only difference is that while the demand curve is negatively sloped, that is, it is having a inverse relationship with price. This one is having direct relationship, because our supply curve is of this nature: price, quantity. And if you recollect, for demand, it is on the other side. So inverse relationship. So for this one, when price increases, quantity supplied is expected to increase. Now we can also have what referred to as perfectly inelastic supply. In the case of this one, this is when supply is not reacting, quantity supply is not reacting or changing despite changes in prices of the commodity. So in that case, elasticity of supply will be equal to price elasticity of supply will be equal to 0. Then we have unit elastic supply when the value is equal to 1, and then there's possibility of the value to range between 1 and infinity. That is, it's greater than 1 but less than infinity. Then in that case, we have relatively elastic supply. Then the last one is relatively inelastic supply. In this case, the value of elasticity of supply will be ranging between 0 and 1, that is greater than 0 but less than 1. So in this case, the percentage change in quantity supplied will be more proportionate than, percentage change in quantity supply will be less proportionate to percentage change in the price of the commodity. Whereas in the case of the fourth one that we have a relative elastic supply, percentage change in quantity supplied will be more proportionate than the percentage change in price of the commodity. So now from here we can take an example where we work out the value of price elasticity of supply. Okay, so we can now have an example, an illustration of how to compute the value of elasticity of supply. So we have this question: given the supply function as Qx equals 600 plus 8p, find the price elasticity of supply as price changes from 10 naira to 20 naira and state the nature of elasticity. So what is the solution to this? Is the first step is to state the formula for obtaining the value of elasticity of supply, and that is given by the expression change in Q over change in P multiplied by P1 over Q1, where our P1, P subscript 1, is initial price, while Q subscript 1 is our initial quantity. Then the change in P or price is given by the current price level minus initial price level, P2 minus P1. And we have from the question given to us, the new price level is 20 naira, which is our P2. The initial price level is 10 naira. So 20 minus 10, it gives 10 naira. Then, based on these values of our prices, 10 naira and 20 naira, we can compute our initial quantity supplied. That is given by, we just substitute the value 10 naira into the supply function. So that gives us Q1, that is initial price, initial quantity supplied, equals 600 plus 8 into 10. Then that is 600 plus 80, and that gives 680 units. That's the quantity supplied at price P, at initial price of 10 naira. Then when the price increased to 20 naira, we can also obtain the value for this. So that will be given by substituting the current price level 20 naira into our supply function. So that gives us Q2 equals 600 plus 8 into 20, and that is 600 plus 160, and that is 760 units. Then based on this, we can now compute our change in quantity supplied, and that will be given by the initial quantity supplied deducted from the current quantity supplied. So from the computation we had earlier on, our quantity supplied at 20 naira is 760, while the quantity supplied at 10 naira is 680. The difference of that will yield 80 units. So all these values will now be substituted into our original supply supply equation, and that will give 80, that is the change in quantity supplied, divided by change in price, which is 10, multiplied by the initial price level, that is 10, the initial quantity supplied, that is 680, and that will give us 0.118. Alternatively, and then the question goes us to, they want us to indicate the nature of elasticity of supply, and since the value ranges between, it's greater than 0 but less than 1, then we have relatively inelastic supply, or just say inelastic supply, which implies that when price changes by 1%, it will only yield 0.118% change in quantity supply, which is less than the change in price. Then alternatively, we can use this approach. The formula for elasticity of supply is the same thing as a percentage change in quantity supplied all over percentage change in price. So we know that the change in price to obtain it will be given by, in quantity will be given by the initial quantity 760 minus 680 all over initial quantity, then multiply by 100 over 1, then the current price minus initial price divided by initial price multiplied by 100 over 1. Then that will give us 80. So from that, this one crosses out. Then from that point, we can have 0.118 from this multiplied by 100%. Then 10 over 10, that is 1, multiplied by 100%. Then from there, we have 11.8% over 100%, and that gives us the same value. So which means we can use this approach or the earlier approach. It will yield or will give us the same answer as the value of our price elasticity of supply. So I hope from this discussion we've learned what is meant by elasticity, what is meant by price elasticity of demand, income elasticity of demand, cost elasticity of demand, the degrees of price elasticity of demand, as well as the factors that could affect price elasticity of demand. And now we have learned price elasticity of supply. So, and there is another form that we refer to as arc price elasticity of demand. This is just an extension of our discussion of price elasticity of demand. So I hope we have learned all of this, and we have had good understanding of how to compute this set of concepts of elasticity. A good day.